G'day, John. Thanks for making time for me, mate. How are you?
Fine kitties.
At least I don't have to ask. Fantastic. We're thrilled to have you as part of our Halloween series of shows, mate. And I imagine this time of year must be absolutely nuts for you.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm the original guy from Down Under. 6 feet under. Yeah, of course, man. Halloween. I mean, it was always my favorite horror day anyway as a kid, I was completely into well, I collected Tales from the Crypt comic books, and for those who are initiated, these comic books were quite controversial back in the 50s and 60s because um, mothers claimed that they caused juvenile delinquency in children. So they tried to get the U.S. government to shut them down, and I of course would hide them in my Casper comics and stuff, and order stuff from the back of the comic books. I remember having like a 6 foot cardboard cutout of Frankenstein, in the corner of my room. I swear that thing would get closer to my bed as every time I woke up, it would be a little closer. That could have been my brother doing that to me, but they didn't have streaming or videotape or on demand or any way to see something when you wanted to see it. So I would have to flip through the TV pages to find out what was playing that week and see if, the 4 o'clock movie called Twilight Movie in Baltimore, where I grew up, was playing any of the Universal horror monster movies or, the sci-fi flicks like the Attack of the 50-Foot Woman or Mothra or, one of these great movies, and they would play the Roger Corman movies, Tingler and
Hmm.
House of Wax and all these great Vincent Price movies and that kind of thing. So that was but especially the Universal horror monster movies were my favorite. So when I got a chance to audition, I was doing another series for HBO on camera, and they knew they wanted somebody who could do voices and be funny and, also, bring a personality to this character. They thought of me and brought me in to try to bring him to life.
And where did the voice come from? Like, was there a particular figure in your life or someone from pop culture that inspired it?
No, I just, they actually had the auditions at Kevin Yeager's studio. And for those of you who don't know, Kevin Yeager is, not only made Chucky and designed Freddy and all these other, creatures that he's famous for doing. Let me see if I can get this with this green screen thing. Huh. But he was designing the puppet. And so they actually had the auditions down at his studio. So I actually, I mean, I was a kid in the candy store anyway, walking into his studio with all these body parts hanging off the walls and and all this thing. And he was creating this, but they didn't give him much of a budget to start. It was HBO was relatively new at the time, and they didn't have a lot of money, and so they weren't giving him a lot of money to work with. And he was making this amazing puppet. There was a couple of different versions of him, and he was using spare parts out of his shop. People don't realize this, but the Crypt Keeper um, has Chucky's eyes.
Yes.
And he just thought that was going to be temporary, but he loved him so much he
Hmm.
kept it. Just perfect for the Crypt Keeper. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah,
And
awesome.
so, I really based it on what I saw and the copy that they gave me, like any other part you'd audition for. And, I think I got the material more than some of the other people who were auditioning. There were some, comics that I had like myself that I recognized, and then some voice actors and those kind of things. And they're looking at the copy, kind of confused, going, be careful what you ask for. You may get it. They're like, this is terrible. What is this? And I'm sitting there going, these guys don't get it. This is like Shakespeare to this guy.
Yep.
Alfred Hitchcock said puns were the highest form of alliteration. And so, I mean, the personality, I loved Alfred Hitchcock Presents as a series and his, wry humor. So I brought that kind of attitude towards him, the hosting aspects of the character. And, my stand-up career was kind of an interesting thing that kind of happened to me. I was doing an off-Broadway musical about stand-up comics, called Three Guys Naked from the Waist Down. It was Scott Bakula, who you all know from Quantum Leap and NCIS, New Orleans,
Hmm.
and all these great shows. Played the MC kind of character, and it was me. I played like the Andy Kaufman-ish kind of character, and my buddy Jerry Colker played the lawyer turned left law school to become a stand-up, the angry comic, and think Dreamgirls, but for stand-up comics. It was a musical. We played all the agents. We played all the other characters. It was really, really great. And people, I had been street performing when I wasn't working in the theater, which paid shit anyway.
Mm.
And so I kind of infused some of my bits that I had created when I was growing up and all these things. And one of my bits was I did The Wizard of Oz in 2.5 minutes. And and while I was doing the show, these people asked me to audition for Star Search, which was in its first season, which was the first, I mean, really high profile competition performer show. And I said, "What, as a singer? You want me to come on as a singer?" Because they saw me in the musical, and they're like, "No, we want you to come on as a comic." And I'm like, I'm not really a stand-up comic. They go, "Well, you can win $100,000." I'm like, "Fuck, have you seen my act?" I was like, So I got my ass into the clubs. I started working up all my material, but I didn't have any jokes.
Mm.
So I was doing like my Wizard of Oz bit, and I was doing, I created this idea of a guy who was addicted to television. He could switch channels on himself and flip through Star Trek and Scotty, be out of here. I can't, Captain. I better get up to work. Factor H is going to blow. He's dead, Jim. It's a twister. It's a twister. Dorothy? And I flipped through all these channels. And so the only thing I guess I really plugged into that was maybe like the Margaret Hamilton Wicked Witch of the West laugh.
Yeah, totally.
Um, and as I was doing it for Kevin Yeager in his studio, and he didn't really have like a recording studio or anything. He just had like a boom box with a little lav mic attached to it that I was recording into a video, into a cassette tape.
Yeah.
And I'm doing it for him, and he must have been through everything that wasn't working because he was sitting there like this, and all of a sudden he was like, he's doing this, and it's cracking me up, and I'm like going, and I start laughing at my own jokes, and adding puns, and he's laughing, and I'm laughing. I go, great, the character laughs at his own jokes, and the next thing I know, because I gave him that rasp because he had all these holes in his throat and rotting teeth.
Yeah.
And within the next day or two, he had me doing it for Joel Silver and Dick Donner, who were the biggest guys in the business, in
Amazing.
some little trailer, in some set that they were starting to shoot the show. And they were working on building the crypt, which is what you see behind
Hmm.
me. And that kind of thing, as well as a set. And they had all this stuff going. And I did it for him in the trailer. He go, great, we'll see you on the set. And I was just like, as an actor, you never believe it till somebody sends you a contract and you actually get the check in the mail. It's like, so, and that was 1988. And we
Mm.
went on the air in 1989, and that was it. The Crypt Keeper evolved over the years because, like I said, they didn't give him much, budget.
Mm.
So like the original Crypt, this is one of the refat. Here, let me get this. There we go. There we go. This one, this version of the Crypt Keeper was a little, further into the series where they gave him a little more money to add servos. Those are those little
Yeah.
hobbyist motors that you do model airplanes and stuff, and spruce him up so he could talk faster and funnier.
Mm.
But because he had such little money, like the mouth barely moved, and Kevin would go into the studio to record, and Kevin was like, no, no, you got to slow down because the puppeteers won't be able to keep up with you because of the mouth. And, So if you look at the earlier episodes, he talks slower and more ominously. But then when the show got picked up and was a bona fide hit, um, they gave us more money, and Kevin spruced him up, so I was able to, do that stand-up delivery that I originally auditioned for him.
Amazing. It's like the two of you were tussling for screen time there. When you
Oh,
holding on.
totally. It's like, you know. But
So how?
gosh, even if I put it on the same plane, it doesn't want to appear. This was the instead of a
Yeah.
spreadsheet at the premiere of Bordello of Blood, they gave these out.
Oh,
They're
amazing.
kind of collectible. People always try to steal them from me at the conventions because
Yeah.
I'll bring one with me and hold it up behind people so they're being photobombed by the Crypt Keeper when I'm, posing for photos with them and stuff.
So tell me about like recording the TV series. Did you record a bunch of episodes at once, or did each episode get done in its own session?
Usually each episode got done in its own session because once they got the tone of the show, even if they had already written it, they may have adjusted it to what came out,
Mm,
as they were shooting. It was, an expensive show to shoot, so they were asking a lot of favors. I mean, all those stars and everybody worked for scale. But these were big producers and everybody wanted to work for them. And Gil Adler, who was the showrunner, was really great at getting that show on budget and getting creative people who could do a lot with, had to do a lot without money. And so, I mean, I think maybe the most I ever recorded at a time would have been 2 episodes.
hmm
They may have been, because they may have been working on two at the same time. Like they would have two different camera crews, and one would be prepping for the next episode while the other one was shooting. So then they
hmm
could just continue right into production into each show. And so and obviously they would have to shoot those as well. So we would pre-record like a rock video so that the puppeteers could,
hmm
I mean, it took 3 puppeteers just to make the face move,
Yeah.
they could coordinate together. But those guys became so good, we could do live interviews where they were
Yeah.
watching me and I'd slow it down a little bit. So I'd be like, and go into some of my stock answers and stuff. And the guy who was working the mouth was like, he had like a headgear on. So he'd be like, hello, kiddies. How are you?
Yeah.
And we were actually could do like live interviews as the Crypt Keeper on
That is
camera.
cool. Very cool.
Yeah,
And
it was very cool. Those guys were really talented.
and for those like the intros and outros for the show, did you get any direction from the celebrity guest directors, or did you have your own director for those?
It depended on who was involved and whether they had time.
Mm,
There were things where I was on the set. They'd bring me on the set if they had other actors in the scene with the Crypt Keeper, like Whoopi Goldberg or
mm,
Arnold Schwarzenegger or these kind of things. They would bring me on the set. So they had somebody live to play to off camera as opposed to just a video recording, a
yep.
recording that they had to play off of. So, and then if we had to adjust the timing later, we could. But so in those sense I got to, but yeah, I mean, they pretty much, if I wanted to go down to the set anytime I wanted, I could. I remember wanting to go down and see Tim Curry play Winona and the mother and father of the, in Death of Some Salesman. And my parents had happened to be in town from the East Coast, and they've never got to see anything shot. They have no
Yep.
concept of the Hollywood system whatsoever. They're really kind of old-fashioned people that way. And I brought them down, and they just couldn't believe that was a Tim Curry
Yeah.
doing this awful hunchback woman. They did so much detail on him. They even gave him like hammer toes and stuff, jammed into these ugly earth shoes and stuff. And he was just brilliant. I mean, he was uh nominated for an Emmy for that performance. I mean, he was
Uh,
really, really wonderful. But
such a unique show in terms of horror. Like, there's been a lot of anthology shows since, but nothing like that.
Yeah.
Just
I mean,
incredible.
they truly went out of their way to make it feel like the comic book. They even used some of the comic book frames as storyboards for the
Hmm.
shots and that kind of thing when it came down to it, the art directors and stuff. But anybody who's talked about doing another version of the Tales from the Crypt that didn't involve us, the rights reverted back to EC Comics, of course, and so we haven't been able to secure them back and do more. Who knows if we could even afford to do the show nowadays? But
I was actually about to ask you that because, suddenly with streaming services, there's a revival of anthology. You've got, what is it? Creep Show on Shudder and even like Fear Street on Netflix. Surely the time is right if there was going to be a revival. But I remember hearing that M. Night Shyamalan was trying to do it without the Crypt Keeper, and that just blew my mind. Like, who would
well, they
consider that?
wanted to, they would have probably come up with their own version of the Crypt Keeper. This one is our guys, Joel and Dick and those guys,
Yeah.
they own this
Mm.
version of him.
Yep.
Although they can't use him as the Crypt Keeper because they don't own Tales from the Crypt for new material anymore. They
Yeah.
own the stuff they made, but they'd have to get the rights back from EC Comics in order to make more involving this Crypt Keeper. So obviously the Crypt Keeper was in the comic books,
Hmm.
and so they could, make their own version. They could put Steve Buscemi in a shroud or something, and he could be the Crypt Keeper.
He's got the eyes for it.
But yeah, exactly. But I mean, which I think would be ridiculous. But I
Mm.
mean, I think that those rights didn't work out because they were trying to do a whole block of horror with was it TNT or TBS? Yeah, one of the two, TNT, I think. And I mean, you got to be the right person to do this. And everybody who was trying to do something different with it wouldn't have been Tales from the Crypt. It would have been
Yeah.
called Tales from the Crypt.
Yep.
But come on, it has to encompass the comic book. You have to bring the
Hmm.
comic book to life. That's really what it's about. And the Crypt Keeper was designed and was made the show successful in that his job was to let you know this is supposed to be fun, that it's tongue in cheek, that
Hmm.
yeah, it may be scary and gory and edgy themes and sexual and all these things, but ultimately it's meant to be fun, which is why we wound up with a kids audience that we didn't know we had,
Yeah.
which to this day is a larger audience than the original people who saw it, which is my fan base on top of the other projects that I've done, the specific Tales from the Crypt fan base, are kids who grew up in the 90s that, either snuck down and watched it. Their parents let them watch it because their parents were hip. There's people that are like, oh, my parents wouldn't let me watch it, but I watched it with my grandmother on the weekends. We loved it, that kind of stuff. A lot of kids watched the cartoon
Hmm.
version. And then there was other kids that were allowed to just see the Crypt Keeper sequences. I mean, what kid's going to walk by a TV, no matter how scary that puppet is, and not want to
Yeah. Yeah.
you know, want to see it? I loved ventriloquist dummies as a kid, no matter how creepy they were to other people. I have a collection of them. It's just
Absolutely.
like,
Absolutely.
I love them.
If I could just talk about the films for a moment, a piece of trivia a lot of people might not realize is that From Dusk Till Dawn and The Frighteners both originally began as scripts from Tales from the Crypt. So I think
Yeah.
that's a fantastic piece of trivia. But can you clear up something about the third one, Ritual?
Uh-huh.
Did you record that and was removed from it, or were you brought in to shoehorn it into the franchise?
It was added later. I mean, they had always planned on doing it as a Tales from the Crypt movie, but it was done with somebody else. The other ones were done with Universal, I believe, Bordello of Blood, and the first one, Demon Knight, which Demon Knight's in my top five horror movies. I mean, it's
Mate,
so awesome.
same here. Incredible.
And the soundtrack is unbelievable. That casting is unbelievable. Ernest Dickerson did an amazing job with that movie, um, but and Bordello of Blood, but then they were going to make this third movie. They'd always planned on it, but it wound up doing it through another. I think they were doing it with Miramax, which at that time, was the Weinstein's, and then they
Yep.
they they bailed on Miramax at that point. I think it was taken over by Disney or something, but I can't remember. I don't quote me on any of this on that
Hmm.
aspects of it.
Yep.
But I do know that it got shelved. It was like it was just part of a library that went to whoever took it over. And as they eventually got around to looking at everything, they went, oh, it's a horror movie. It's got Jennifer Grey. It's got Craig Sheffer. It's got Tim Curry. Okay. It didn't have a Crypt Keeper sequence that we shot for it yet.
Mm.
And so they put it with some other on a video with some other movie. I don't even think it was billed on the box. I don't think it
No.
was called Rituals. And then there became so many people going, whatever happened to that? I think it was originally called The Big Easy because it took place in New Orleans.
Mm.
And I mean, it was, and everybody kept going, what happened to that movie? What happened to that movie? They were like, oh, it's not going to cost us much. Let's do a Crypt Keeper sequence and we'll reimagine it. And they used like, they didn't want to hire the puppeteers. They didn't want to spend the money. So they got like this automated face puppet, which I was just like, if I had known that, I would have not even agreed to do it.
Yeah.
But it was like, I was like, are you kidding me? Come on. The quality of the show is one of the reasons why it's so great. It still holds up.
Yeah. Totally.
And so, it wound up being, and, a lot of people were like, this isn't bad. This is fun. It feels like a lengthened Tales from the Crypt episode.
Mm.
Certainly not Demon Night.
Yeah.
And Bordello of Blood certainly wasn't Demon Night either, but people who love Tales from the Crypt love Bordello of Blood, especially
Yeah.
young men,
No, I love it.
from Hospital Seasons, you know.
Yeah, I think both of those, the first two films, are favorites of ours on this show. Like we talk about them fairly frequently, for
Yeah.
sure. And the great is it Charles Fleischer in Demon Knight? Just what a legend! I love it.
Yeah. Charlie and I will go to we'll be invited to screenings along with Richard Donner, and the two of us will dick off each other because we used to do improv at the
Yeah,
improvisation in LA together years ago. And we'll, start like riffing, and Charlie's insane. I mean, the
he is.
stuff he
I wish he would bring his podcast back. I just love the guy.
yeah. Yeah, yeah, me too. And so we'll have some fun doing that every once in a while, at some
Yeah,
of these screenings and that kind of thing. So,
awesome. Well, we are running out of time, but before I let you go, on a personal note, what are some of your favorite films in general, horror or non-related?
well, I was just having a conversation last night. I had over the house here one of the biggest directors in Hollywood. He's a friend of mine, and I'm not going to name him because he lives a very personal life. But we were talking about how Lawrence of Arabia has always been one of my favorites. David Lean with those huge epics were always some of my favorite movies. Whether it was
Yeah.
Doctor Zhivago or you know um, Lawrence of Arabia, or I mean, these were amazing movies. Um, in terms of horror movies, I mean, the ones that really creeped me out were stuff like, The Exorcist and Omen and
Mm.
movies like that. Certainly, I love the monster movies. Slasher films are fun, but they don't have the gravitas of of what a movie can be on top of just being a horror movie. I
Yeah.
mean, if you really think about it, Jaws is a horror movie,
Yeah. Totally.
and that's one of my favorites, and
Yeah.
it holds up like to this day for that reason. But I mean, I love so many movies. I love going to the movies. As a little kid, my mom used to send, there were five kids in my family. She'd send the five of us with, brown paper bags. She'd make her own popcorn with the grease, bleeding through the bag, and get our quarter or whatever it costs to go to the movies. And no, I'm not that old. That's just how cheap it used to be. And we'd go and see a Disney animated film or something like that, which are some of my favorites. I love
Hmm.
what I work a lot for Illumination, and they make unbelievable movies. So I mean, I have a wide range of movies that I love, but ultimately, I mean, always loved all the Bond films. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
come
For
on,
sure.
so Hollywood at its best is really what I'm looking for in a film, but at the same time, I love going to a good film festival and seeing something really personal.
Hmm.
With the acting is fantastic, you know.
Certainly. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, John, your work is so much more than Tales from the Crypt, and I would encourage everybody to do a deep dive into your catalogue of films because it's an incredible body of work. And just want to thank you so much for your time. I used to stay up every night watching reruns with a mate, and yeah, so it's an absolute honour for me to connect with you like this.
Thank you. And be careful what you ask for. You may get it.